We always talking about the southern border and building a fence there. We don't talk about a northern border.
I was just talking
If this is about securing the border from potentially terrorists coming over.
Well,
we want to build a wall north of the border
Some
too?
people have asked us about that in New Hampshire. They raised some very legitimate concerns, including some law enforcement folks that brought that up to me at one of our town hall meetings about a week and a half ago. So that is a legitimate issue for us to look at.
All right, everybody, we've spent the last couple months talking about the reasons that we got Donald Trump in the White House. Thus far, we've talked about mostly the Democrats. We've talked about the impact that they've had on society. We've talked about the primary challenges. We've talked about the general challenges. And we've done so outside of the realm of mudslinging. We've actually sat down and looked at some of the policies that some of these people have had and how they affected the voting populace in general. Now, in general, I'm going to be a lot less critical of the Republican field. The majority of them this time around were very libertarian, and a couple of them were even freshman politicians. And these are values that I hold dear to my heart, and this is a lot of the reason that I vote Republican right now, even though I've been known to be a Democrat in the past. So, for the Republican field, I had planned on condensing them down into one video and just going through their individual failures rather than making an in-depth analysis of each one of them. But there was one member on that field that I wanted to take and single out and talk a little bit more about. Because having him in the field, and just in general having him in politics, was one of the biggest boosts to Trump in getting through the primary season. And of course I'm talking about the person who was in the previously shown video clip. My governor, Mr. Scott Walker. Now, in the past, I've had good things to say about Walker, and I've had bad things to say about Walker. It's been mostly good. I actually pretty much approve of his performance throughout the state. He's done a lot of really good things with this state. He's done a couple of bad things here and there, but anything that comes on the outset as being bad is usually explained away in another factor. Now, when Walker first got into office, he was largely swept under the rug by the media. And that includes local media. A lot of people in Wisconsin didn't even know who Walker was. They'd come into the state from visiting another state and say, Governor Scott Walker, open for business. Oh, what does that mean? Going into the 2010 election cycle, there was a massive budget deficit in Wisconsin, and that was a big part of what got Scott Walker elected. He came in and he went out and he campaigned and he made some promises saying that he was going to find a way to fix the budget and get spending on track, even get us a budget surplus so we could pay back some of the debt that we owed to the federal government. And of course, more state money meant more money for police, roads, other infrastructure, and government buildings especially, and government programs. It all seemed like a big win-win at the time. But of course, there wasn't anybody that was really paying any sort of attention to anything because the federal recession was just beginning. People were starting to lose jobs. That was part of the reason that we were starting to lose tax revenue. And all of the focus was placed on the blossoming Obama administration and the rock star that our country had just elected into the White House. Scott Walker gained national prominence when he went to the Wisconsin legislature in 2011 and introduced a budget repair bill. The downside of the bill was that the majority of what it was affecting was going to be the collective bargaining rights and pensions of many state employees, including teachers, but also police, fire, EMT, and other federal services. It was actually a pretty mild change. I read the bill front to back. The major proponent of the change was that Scott Walker wanted state employees to contribute 3% into their own retirement. With the number of state employees that we had at the time, and the number that we were planning on adding going into the recessing economy, it seemed like a pretty mild trade-off. Put a little bit in yourself, and we will take some of the money and go back and use it to fix the roads that you use to get back and forth to work. Unfortunately, And this was a big part of the reason that a lot of people brought up as being opposed to the bill. It also prevented the ability for police, fire, and other essential services to strike. Walker gained a lot of blowback from this, and there were a lot of protests in the Capitol. I know that my supervisor at the time went up to the Capitol. I was working in Milwaukee at the time. He went up to Madison to the Capitol to do a counter protest of that, and just in general be around and speak and take in the culture of what people were arguing about when they were trying to prevent this budget repair bill from happening. Now, naturally, a Republican getting something done in today's political atmosphere meant there had to be some sort of criminal activity involved, and he had to be illegitimate to hold the public office. I want to talk about this a little bit later in the video, because this is probably part of what helped Trump win Wisconsin. We'll get to that in a little bit. But first, I do want to take some time and talk just about the primary field and the role that Scott Walker played in it. Now, all Wisconsin Republicans knew that Scott Walker was planning on running for president. It was common knowledge at that point. Even if we didn't know, even if we didn't hear it directly from him, the Democrats going into the recall election and going into his next election after the recall election always took the time to remind us that Walker was planning on running for president and may not be able to fill his term. Many of them demanded that he sign a contract saying that he would come back and fill the term if he were to get reelected in his second election bid. At the time, we all kind of just assumed that Walker was going to become the front runner and he was going to become the president. He got stuff done, so we didn't have any worries about the fact that we were going to vote for him. We kind of figured that Wisconsin was going to go red for him. But we also thought that with the recessing economy and the fact that many of the people across middle America were losing our jobs, and the fact that we were at the time $17 trillion in debt, that we wanted somebody who had experience with doing budget repair bills and fighting the legislation that goes with those kinds of bills, and just people in general who wanted to go out and fiscally fix our country. It's always interesting when you go into a fiscal recession how quickly people want politicians with fiscal experience to go up there and take the reins. Unfortunately, Walker peaked really early. As I said, he went into the debates and he went into the entire situation with the backing of Act 10 behind him and a legislative record that showed that he wanted to go out and get things done, and he wanted to make a better life for not just the people that supported him, but a better life for everybody in the state. But unfortunately, he got trumped. And when he got trumped, he went even further and he tried to out-Trump Trump. I strongly believe to this day that the nail that sealed the coffin of the Walker presidential campaign was the fact that he went out and said that he wanted to build a wall with Canada as well as the wall against Mexico. I'm going to explain something that most people don't understand. Canada is not a threat to us. There's really no reason for there to be a wall. In fact, if there was a wall, it would cut down on the commerce, and it would just in general cut down on our ability to trade with one of our biggest trading partners, no matter what tariffs we have on them and no matter what Trudeau says about us at the time. I mean, for God's sakes, if you want to come back from Boston to Wisconsin and you want to cut through Ontario, you don't need a passport. They'll pretty much just wave you through. They'll probably ask you why you're coming into Canada. But yeah, if you want to cut across the southern tip of Ontario and go into Detroit for whatever reason to cut a few hours off your journey going across I-90, that's legal without a passport. So I don't see there being any need to have a wall up there. In fact, putting the wall up there would make that, in fact, illegal instead. So yeah, I continue to strongly believe that that's what ended Scott Walker's short-lived political career for presidency. And in all honesty, I don't know how well he's going to fare when he comes up for re-election this year after making the same kind of gaffe. I'm a little bit worried about that. I hope he goes on, or at least he gets primaried by somebody else who can possibly win against another governor, but I think that comment and the backlash he got out of that took a lot of the steam out of his political sails. But it'll be good. I mean, that'll be the one gaffe that he's had on his record, and he's had an astounding gubernatorial record otherwise. He's done a lot of really good things, and he's going to have a really good legacy that comes in behind him. No matter what year he retires, he's going to have that legacy as well. So I'm not really that worried about Scott Walker as far as going down in history as a shameful governor or a shameful politician. He earned my votes. But in all honesty, the entire controversy that fell behind Act 10, the entire controversy that's fallen behind Walker, and the so-called federal investigation into the Trump campaign and Trump himself are a big part of the reason that I believe that Trump got elected president. Not so much why he got elected, because a lot of this didn't come until after he was elected, but why I believe that Wisconsin will go red in the midterms, maybe not in the governor's mansion, but definitely in the legislature, and why I think Wisconsin will go for Trump in 2020. With the Manafort trials underway, and the fact that Mueller has come out and said that he is not investigating Trump himself specifically for the election collusion, he's investigating some Trump staffers, but he's not specifically investigating Trump himself. I start to hear a lot on social media and alt media as well, different people coming out and saying, aha, we've got Trump this time. This is going to be the criminal offense that takes him out of office. This is what we're going to indict him on. This is what we're going to get rid of him on. This is going to be the smoking gun. I just listened to an episode of Pod Save America that was entitled "The Tweet That's Going to Be the Smoking Gun." And in the end, it always turns out to be a giant nothing burger. Once all the dust settles and all the news coverage goes away, it always turns out that there was no criminal intent or activity involved in any of this. And the people who have the massive hard-on to get Trump out of office are left walking away with blue balls. Now, the reason that I bring this up when I talk about Walker is the fact that most people in the country are seeing a lot of this for the first time. Some people aren't. Some of the other people in other states know what I'm talking about. They may have run a similar battle with their governors or other elected officials. But I bring this up simply because we've seen this before. After Act 10 went into place, the opposition to Trump, especially coming from the unions, which Act 10 affected the most directly, started coming out and flooding social media with different ideas of what they are going to essentially get rid of Scott Walker on. Walker himself can be indicted, even though he is an elected official. The lack of ability to indict only falls on the president himself. You would have to impeach the president and get him removed from office before you could indict him in a general court. As soon as the recall efforts in Wisconsin failed, the recall efforts, I might add, that the unions thought that they were going to win in a landslide, the union bosses started digging up any sort of campaign documentation they could. There have been 2 that I know of John Doe investigations going through and investigating Walker for campaign finance reform. And there have been indictments to members of the Walker campaign. Usually they're to an unrelated charge, and usually they fall into nothing, and usually they had nothing to do with the elected official themselves. Sound familiar? In 2018, the Mueller probe has dominated headlines on every major news outlet, both in print and in video, and it's even dominated headlines to Trump supporters in the alternative media. But in all honesty, I am a little bit bored with this. If I had my friend Matt's sounder board, you would hear the sounder that said, "I don't give a fuck" right now. Because I don't. Because I know this is going absolutely nowhere. Because I've seen this all before. I can tell you right away that when the Mueller investigation comes out, and he does come out and say that he has nothing, especially considering he's already told the Washington Post that he's not directly investigating Trump. Instead, he's getting Manafort on a 5-year-old money laundering charge. Then they're going to go through and they're going to open up another special counsel if they do anything like they did in Wisconsin. The most important thing that they can do is get an elected official out that opposes them that is actually getting something done. I know we would have heard the tripe already if it had been Walker that got elected, or Jeb Bush, or Cruz, or anything else. Everybody was going to be a racist and a sexist and a bigot, an Islamophobe, and any other kind of name that you could throw at them. But it never would have reached this level. I don't believe Jeb would have got a lot done. I think Cruz might have got a little bit done. I know Walker would have got a lot done. But the fact of the matter is most of these other politicians, Walker aside, would have been able to be pressured and controlled by the opposition and kept from getting things done. People like Walker and people like Trump just truck forward and get it done anyway. And their opposition will make up all sorts of numbers to try and discredit them and try and show that they're trying to screw the American people. We're dealing with that with Foxconn right now. A Japanese LCD screen manufacturer has planned on building a plant in Wisconsin, and Scott Walker gave a $4 billion tax subsidy to that company in order to build their factory here, in order to incentivize them to come here and put Wisconsin workers to work, and maybe entice a few Illinois taxpayers to come over here and work as well and get out of the tax hell that is Illinois. But all you hear about on the news right now is the fact that he gave away $4 billion of taxpayer money, and that's our money, and he stole it from us, and he gave it away to an offshore account. Let me explain something to you. Foxconn required a period of time where they needed to have 1,000 truckloads of gravel trucked in a day from sources that came from, as far as I know, as far as Madison and possibly farther. I know they took some of the gravel out of the roads that they're building over where I live and used that to help pave the bottom of the Foxconn plant, to help pave the foundation of it. If you are taking a dump truck from Racine to Madison to get gravel, you are going just about from one road site to where I know they're building the Foxconn plant. You're going about 90 miles in a truck that gets 4 to 6 miles per gallon of diesel. And you're doing that 1,000 times a day. The tax on the fuel more than covered the subsidy that Walker gave away to Foxconn. And that's not even counting any of the other income taxes that they're taking off of the people that are working on the building and the business taxes from the contractors that are coming in to build this building. And it doesn't even touch the income tax increase of the people that are going to finally have really good jobs in that area, and the people who are going to come over from the state of Illinois, move into our state, and start paying property tax in our state. You can throw that $4 billion number around all you want, but this is still a net gain for Wisconsin. And it was the exact same argument that was made when Trump decided to give a subsidy to Ford to build a plant here and Carrier to build and keep a plant here as well. It was always just giving away the taxpayer money, and nobody sat and realized what kind of taxes go into building something like that as well. So do I think that Walker was a good governor? I definitely do. In spite of what I said earlier about the fact that his comment on the Canadian border wall may have taken the wind out of his political sails, I legitimately hope that he does get reelected this year and that he does continue to truck forward and get things done in this state. Maybe have one more term. I think he should start thinking about hanging up his hat after that term, because then we can get a fresh person in with fresher ideas and new ways of doing things. But for the most part, I give him an A on his effort in this state and his performance. Do I think he would have made a good president? That's kind of up in the air. I think he would have taken a lot of the political controversy from Wisconsin into the White House with him, and I think there would have been enough obstruction that it would have kept him from getting anything done. I think he may have even had more obstruction than Trump was having, and would have been able to get even less done than Trump is doing with all the obstruction that he's having. Would I have voted for Walker in the presidential run? You bet your ass I would have. I'll put some links in the description below so you can do some independent reading on some of the controversies that Walker went through while he was the governor of our state, so that you can take some time and see just how similar the situations were between what Trump is going through now and what Walker went through in 2011 and 2012. I hope you take the time because it'll give you a new perspective on the obstructionism that's going on against Trump. And it'll give you a lot of insight as to why I think Trump will make it in 2020, barring some major gaffe that he could bring up. What did you think of Walker's brief performance? Do you have any further questions on what we did with Walker in this state and what we plan on doing going forward? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comment section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care, everyone.